In the summer heat of 1880, in a small house shaded by magnolias in Tuscumbia, Alabama, a healthy baby girl was born to Arthur and Kate Keller. They named her Helen. For her first 19 months, Helen's world was vibrant. A swirl of family voices, laughter, sunlight through the trees, and the gentle rhythms of Southern life. Her parents doted on her. She was lively, curious, full of laughter. Neighbors called her bright as sunshine, her spirit as wild and untamed as the land that surrounded her. But fate had other plans. In February 1882, Helen was struck by a sudden illness, a raging fever and congestion that doctors later called brain fever. She survived, but when the fever broke, Helen was left in darkness and silence. She could no longer see her mother's face or hear her father's voice. Her world had shrunk to touch and scent, vibration and movement. Helen's frustration exploded into anger. She could not understand why her hands meant only emptiness in the air, why people's lips moved but nothing reached her. She invented her own signs to communicate. A pull meant come, a push go, a shake of the head for no. But so often she was misunderstood. Her temper grew fierce. By the age of 6, Helen was wild and uncontrollable, prone to violent tantrums, smashing dishes and screaming in rage, desperate to be understood. Her mother, Kate, refused to give up hope. She read Charles Dickens's account of Laura Bridgman, another deafblind child, and became convinced that her daughter could learn. The Kellers sought help, writing to Alexander Graham Bell, the famed inventor who in turn recommended the Perkins School for the Blind in Boston. In March 1887, into the chaos of Helen's world stepped a 20-year-old teacher named Anne Sullivan. Anne had known blindness and loss herself, her childhood scarred by poverty, abandonment, and sickness. But she was fierce, determined, and brimming with compassion. Helen called her teacher, and from that moment, a lifelong bond began. Anne's arrival changed everything. She insisted on discipline and boundaries, even as she showered Helen with affection. Their first battles were epic. Helen fought her, bit her, knocked out a tooth, and locked her in her room. But Anne persisted, moving with Helen into a small cottage on the Keller property, determined to break through. Anne's method was simple but revolutionary. She spelled words into Helen's hand using manual fingerspelling, DOLLCUPBREAKFAST. But Helen mimicked without understanding. The letters were just shapes, empty of meaning. Anne grew frustrated, but never quit. She believed against all odds that Helen would break through the wall of silence. The breakthrough came one spring day at the water pump. Anne thrust Helen's hand under the cool gush, spelling WATER into her palm over and over. Suddenly, Helen stopped. The realization flooded her. The symbols Anne made stood for the water rushing over her skin. Water, Helen spelled back, trembling with joy. The world had opened. Helen touched everything, demanding its name. By nightfall, she knew 30 new words. Anne wept with relief and pride. That day was the beginning of Helen's true life. She learned at lightning speed, hundreds then thousands of words, the patterns of grammar, the delight of ideas. Anne taught her to read Braille in raised print. Helen learned to write, pressing a pencil against paper, then using a typewriter. She read with her fingers, devouring the stories of Dickens, Shakespeare, and Greek myths. But the world outside their small circle was not always kind. Many doubted that a deaf-blind girl could ever truly learn or think for herself. Helen was paraded before experts, forced to prove she was not just parroting Anne. There were accusations of fraud, suspicion, and sometimes cruel spectacle. Helen endured with Anne by her side, her soul's liberator, as she called her. Helen's hunger for knowledge was boundless. She longed for the same education as sighted, hearing children. With Anne's tireless support, fingers always spelling, always explaining, Helen was admitted to the Perkins School, then to the Wright Humason School for the Deaf in New York, and eventually to Radcliffe College, Harvard's women's college. She became the first deaf-blind person in history to earn a Bachelor of Arts degree, graduating cum laude in 1904. Her valedictory address, dictated letter by painstaking letter into Anne's hand, became a hymn to perseverance. We can do anything we want if we stick to it long enough. But Helen's journey was more than academic. She forged friendships with great writers and thinkers: Mark Twain, Alexander Graham Bell, John Macy, and many more. She traveled the world, speaking with interpreters on behalf of the disabled, the poor, and women's suffrage. She campaigned for the blind and deaf, founded organizations, and lobbied for government reform. Her speeches and books, 12 in all, brought hope to millions. Helen's private life was touched by heartbreak. She longed for love and independence, once falling in love with her secretary, Peter Fagan. They planned to elope, but her family intervened, fearing that the world would never accept a marriage for a woman so vulnerable. The pain of lost love haunted her, but Helen refused to become bitter. She poured her passion into her causes, declaring, "One can never consent to creep when one feels an impulse to soar." Anne Sullivan, her beloved teacher, became her lifelong companion. As Anne's own health failed, Helen cared for her, just as Anne had once cared for Helen. Their bond, a blend of love, friendship, and shared triumph, remained the anchor of Helen's life. When Anne died in 1936, Helen grieved deeply but pressed on, determined to honor Anne's legacy through her own work. Helen Keller's later years were a blur of advocacy, travel, and inspiration. She visited more than 30 countries, meeting presidents and kings, and bringing light to children who knew only darkness. She became a global symbol of courage, the woman who, against all odds, had broken free from isolation to claim her place in the world. When Helen died in 1968, she left behind a world transformed. Her life proved that disability need not mean despair, that the limits we place on ourselves and others are often illusions. Her autobiography, The Story of My Life, still stirs hearts, and her words remain a clarion call. Although the world is full of suffering, it is also full of the overcoming of it. Helen Keller's story is not just about breaking the silence or finding the light. It is about the indomitable power of the human spirit to reach across barriers and connect, to turn struggle into strength, and to transform loneliness into love. For anyone who has ever felt trapped in darkness or unheard by the world, Helen Keller's journey is a beacon. Even when you cannot see the path, you can feel your way forward, one touch, one word, one act of courage at a time.